3 years in a row. Welcome to From Center Ice. My name is Courtney, and the Stanley Cup Final matchup is set. I did a video wrapping up the Western Conference. If you haven't seen that, go ahead and watch that after this video, but now let's wrap up the Eastern Conference. And for the third straight season, the Tampa Bay Lightning are the champs of the East. But let's take a look back at their journey to get here. When the 2021-22 season began, there were 16 teams in the East. Only 8 can make the playoffs. That means that 8 missed out. Let's take a look at those 8 teams that we haven't heard from in a while because they weren't in the playoffs. We will start in the Metropolitan Division, where we have the New York Islanders coming in 5th in the Metro. Next up, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets finishing 6th in the Metro. The New Jersey Devils finished 7th. And last but not least, the Philadelphia Flyers coming in 8th and final place in the Metropolitan Division. Moving over to the Atlantic Division, we have the Buffalo Sabres finishing 5th in the Atlantic. Then we move a bit further away from that ocean, where we have the Detroit Red Wings coming in 6th. Finishing 7th in the Atlantic Division, you have the Ottawa Senators. And last but not least, in the Atlantic Division, in 8th place, you have the Montreal Canadiens, who are also drafting 1st overall in this upcoming NHL entry draft. So those are your 8 teams out east who did not make the playoffs. So let's go over the ones who did. And we'll start back in the Metro Division. First up, winning the Metropolitan Division in the regular season, you have the Carolina Hurricanes. Up next, in 2nd, you have the New York Rangers. The Pittsburgh Penguins finished 3rd in the Metro. And finally, you have the Washington Capitals finishing 4th place in the Metropolitan Division. Moving on to the Atlantic Division, first up, we have the President's Trophy winning team in the Florida Panthers. In the regular season, they were 1st place in the Atlantic Division, 1st place in the Eastern Conference, 1st place in the National Hockey League. Up next, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs finishing 2nd in the Atlantic Division. Finishing 3rd, you have the Tampa Bay Lightning. And last but not least, coming in 4th place in the Atlantic Division were the Boston Bruins. So those were your challengers, if you will. Let's talk about the first round matchups. Up first, we have the Florida Panthers taking on the Washington Capitals. Florida won that series in 6 games with a 4-3 overtime win in Game 6 after the Capitals had tied it up late, sending it to overtime. Then we have the Carolina Hurricanes taking on the Boston Bruins, the battle of the home teams. The Carolina Hurricanes had home ice advantage in this series and won it in 7 games with a 3-2 victory in that final game. Neither team could win on the road, so it worked out for Carolina. Next up, the New York Rangers taking on the Pittsburgh Penguins, another series that featured a lot of home wins. And the New York Rangers took Game 7 with a 4-3 overtime win on a shot from Artemi Panarin. One of those games where he actually chose to shoot the puck and it went in. That series was very dramatic. From Igor Shesterkin being pulled in I think 2 games and allowing like 7 goals in a game, to Tristan Jarry for the Pittsburgh Penguins being injured coming into the playoffs, so they had to start their backup Casey DeSmith. He went out in the first game in overtime. Louis Domingue had to come in, their 3rd string goaltender, and he helped push that thing to a Game 7. Very dramatic, very fun, but the Rangers took that series in 7 games. And then the last matchup in the first round were the Toronto Maple Leafs taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning. That series was very back and forth, Toronto winning Game 1, Tampa winning Game 2, and back and forth until the Tampa Bay Lightning won both games 6 and 7 to seal their victory in the first round. They closed it out with a 2-1 win there in the final game, just showing how close that series was. And sad for Leafs fans like myself. But that was the first round. Moving on to the second round. First up, we had the Florida Panthers taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Battle of Florida once again. And the Tampa Bay Lightning swept that series, finishing it off with a 2-0 win in Game 4. 4. We were told we were going to get a great series, the Battle of Florida once again, the best matchup in the postseason last year, and I think the Florida Panthers just plainly forgot to show up. Or they were too busy going to strip clubs. We'll never know. And then you have the other matchup out east in the second round, that being the New York Rangers taking on the Carolina Hurricanes. Again, Carolina could not win on the road, but neither could the New York Rangers until Game 7. The Rangers came out to break that Carolina home winning streak, and they did with a 6-2 victory, sending them to the Eastern Conference Final against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So let's move on to the Eastern Conference Final, where it looked like maybe we would get a close series, an interesting series. The New York Rangers took the first 2 games at Madison Square Garden. Game 1, the Rangers won 6-2. Game 2, the Rangers won 3-2. And then the series shifted back to Tampa Bay. And the team that looked lifeless in those first 2 games came to life in front of their home fans, and they did not let go. Tampa won Game 3, 3-2, and that was the final game in the series where the New York Rangers scored more than 1 goal. And from there, it was basically just the Lightning counting down to eliminating the Rangers. Game 4, 4-1. Game 5, 3-1. So you have 4, 3, and then 2-1 was the final in Game 6. Vasilevskiy didn't get a shutout there in a closeout game for once. He didn't against Toronto either, but he did come back in the second round there and get a shutout in the final game. So after losing the first 2 games of the series, Tampa Bay came back and won the Eastern Conference Final 4-2. And for the 3rd time in 3 seasons, they are going back to the Stanley Cup Final, where they will take on the Colorado Avalanche, the winners of the West. To put a nice little bow on these first 3 rounds for Tampa, let's go over their top 10 point leaders. First up, Nikita Kucherov leading the way. Through 17 games, Kucherov scored 7 goals and added 16 assists for 23 points. Up next is Andrei. He played 17 games in the postseason, scoring 8 goals and 8 assists for 16 points. In third, you have the captain, Steven Stamkos. In 17 games, he scored 9 goals and 6 assists for 15 points. Up next is Victor Hedman. In 17 games, he scored 2 goals and added 12 assists for 14 points. In fifth, we have Ross Colton. In 17 games, he scored 5 goals and 3 assists for 8 points. Up next is Corey Perry. He scored 5 goals and 3 assists for 8 points. All of these top guys have 17 games played now that I see that. In seventh, we have Nick Paul. Tampa picked him up at the trade deadline from the Ottawa Senators, and he contributed 3 goals and 4 assists for 7 points. Up next, we have Mikhail Sergachev with 1 goal and 6 assists for 7 points. In ninth, we have another deadline pickup for Tampa with Brandon Hagel. Of course, they picked him up from the Chicago Blackhawks. He scored 2 goals and 3 assists for 5 points in the first 3 rounds. And last but not least, we have Anthony Cirelli. He scored 1 goal and 4 assists for 5 points, but I'm sure he kept a lot more goals off the board. For the opposing team, of course. That brings us to the man in net, Andrei Vasilevskiy, playing all 17 games for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's got a record of 12-5 with a .928 save percentage and a 2.27 goals against average. As always, the big cat is holding it down in the net for Tampa. So that's how the Lightning got here. They knocked off the Maple Leafs, they knocked off the Florida Panthers, and then they knocked off the New York Rangers. Tomorrow night, we have Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final, which is going to be a great series between 2 powerhouse teams from their respective conferences. Are you ready for it? I'm ready for it. But that's going to be all from me in this video. If you're a Tampa Bay Lightning fan, how you feeling about the final? Let me know down in the comments. If you want to hear more from me or from Center Ice, you can head on over to FromCenterIce.com. There's links to all the places you can find us over there. If you want to follow along on social media, you can do that. All of the links are down in the description. And go ahead and subscribe to this channel if you haven't done that yet. Give this video a like. That would make me so very happy. All of that being said, thank you all so very much for tuning in. I appreciate each and every one of you. And now we get ready to watch the Stanley Cup Final. I will see y'all in the next video. Bye, guys.